Welcome back, everyone, and thanks so much for watching. We actually got a bike back in the garage that we worked on before. If you don't know, we actually had just a No Rules Life page maybe a couple of months ago. We split that out into two different pages. It just made sense. The three videos in the series for this one were actually on the original page, so I will put a link in the description below so you can go check those out. I appreciate that. But we got one more thing we need to do on this bike, and it's not a doozy, but it's kind of a lot of work, and it's something that I have been putting off because I just don't want to do it. But let's jump right into it, and I'll also kind of give you a background on this bike if you haven't seen the videos. So this bike is a 97 Sportster. It's got about, I'm not going to turn on the odometer or the speedometer, but it's got about 53,000 miles on it. Just kind of do a little walk around here. And it was essentially, at the time on Marketplace, the cheapest thing you could buy with the words Harley Davidson in it. So you can just, take whatever you want from that. The problem with this bike when we bought it is, number one, it was in bad shape. Number two, the previous owner was lying about everything. I'm surprised they didn't lie about where they lived. I know that's mean, but that's the truth. So this bike had been down. They say they dropped it. I think it was worse than that. I'm looking at the fork tubes because both tubes were bent. When the fork tubes were bent, that caliper was actually locked on there so bad I had to take a sledgehammer to it. It was bad. The gas tank's got a dent on the other side. We had to rebuild the carburetor. It had bad throttle cables and idle cables, everything. I mean, it was just, we had to go through everything. We removed the rear wheel, everything to clean it up. So it's come a long way. It'll go down the road now where it wouldn't before. And also, even the title was a problem. We actually had to get law enforcement involved just to get the title squared away. So when I say this thing was left for dead, it was left for dead. And that's what we titled it in the other. But what we're dealing with now is down here. You can see I've already got some stuff removed. So the bike rides fine. It'll go through the gears. The problem is it doesn't shift smooth. It doesn't shift good at all. So when you first fire it up, I know, a lot of you know these older bikes will clunk when you put them in first gear. It's relatively normal. So this one right here, it'll find first gear. You can get into second, you can get into third pretty good, but then fourth and fifth are very tough. And I suspect that the shifter pawl, whatever you want to call it, however you call it, I don't know if I said that right, but whatever, hate me anyway. The shifter pawl is out of adjustment. So to kind of put that into terms that makes sense, imagine having a 5 or 6 speed manual car and the motor runs good and the transmission, all the gears work fine, but you're having a hard time getting it to gear. That's essentially what's going on here. So we're going to pull this cover off. We are going to pull the entire primary off to get to it and see if we can adjust it. So I have never done this before. So we will do this together. And if it works, great. If not, you'll see the results regardless. So hopefully it works. If not, then it's got to be a transmission problem. And if that's the case, then it's going to have to kind of be sold as is. But we're going to get into it. So a couple things here real quick. We've already disconnected where the clutch cable goes. You can see the clutch cable. I actually have that laying down because that adjuster is so rusted. That's the only way to get it to take all the tension off of it, or take up some of the, you know what I mean, to loosen it up. Should I replace it? Yeah, but I'm not because this bike's so old. And then, of course, it's disconnected there. I've already removed the foot peg mount for the mid controls. Already removed the shift lever, which was an absolute pain. So now we're just going to start pulling everything off. And hopefully this adjustment will get us where we need. But let me get this camera in the stand and we're just going to get to it and see where we can get with it. The best thing to do here is just get comfortable. We don't have, as you can see, any special tables or lifts or anything here other than this bike jack that this thing's on. Get comfortable, have a seat, and start pulling things off. A few things real quick before we get into it. I did this on the other video on that bike actually. In the background, we had to pull the primary on it. I like to take and make a diagram, obviously to scale, just kind of show where all the bolts were, just make sure everything's going back where it was in its place. I don't think it's necessary. I just like doing it. I've seen a lot of other guys do it, and I just kind of follow along there. But when you do remove this, it's going to have to, you're still going to have the clutch cable attached. So you're going to kind of remove it as one unit. So we'll pop this off, set it aside, and that allows us to get in the middle. So let's get right into it and see if we can't get this sucker off. As you can see, these are not very loose. They're not supposed to be loose. I'm sorry. These are not very tight. They're a very low torque spec. You do not want to ever over tighten these. I would prefer to actually have these things drip a little bit and then go back and retighten them some, which is what I had to do on that bike over there, because they can easily booger up these threads. Because remember, you've got a steel bolt going into soft aluminum. Oh, she's coming off. Answers my next question. I actually got a hammer to get this thing off. One thing I will say on this bike is everything that we've messed with on it has been loose, which is kind of remarkable. Oh, it's a mess. Oh, it's a mess. I thought I was so smart putting that drain. This gasket, ooh, that's a problem. This gasket actually came off pretty easy. I'm betting that this sucker has been into. I'm thinking somebody's been in this bike recently for whatever reason. And it looks like, just based on what I'm seeing, based on that wire, that somebody replaced the stator not too long ago. That would be my guess, but we're leaving that alone. So we're just going to set this over here, off to the side. And I'm going to get this mess cleaned up, and then we're going to go ahead and start pulling everything else off. So we got the cover off and went pretty well. See, it's just sitting over there, and technically I could move that cover out of the way. You can see that fell off that piece of wood, so that's fine. But anyway, here's where we are. One thing I failed to mention is before you remove that cover, you do have to loosen that shoe, that adjuster. That's the chain tension adjuster, and it's just I can't remember the nut size on the bottom. I think it's one size bigger than 3/4, which I can't remember. Then there's an Allen key that goes in the bottom. But just back that off all the way. Adjusting that's super easy. And you can see, here we go. Oh, and by the way, that shoe is really, really pretty worn, but we're going to pretend we didn't see that because I do not want to replace it. Okay, so we're going to be getting this nut off first for the compensator. This is 1 1/8, I believe. We're going to be using an impact on that. Hopefully it takes it off. If not, I've got other ways to get it off. And this is 1 and, I believe, 3/16. I may be wrong. I have to check it. But you got to take the snap ring off first to get that out. Everybody's favorite, snap rings. And then once we remove that, we're going to pull it off, and we can get to the shifter pawl that's right back in here that literally connects to this. So all this is doing is just literally shifting it up and down in the gears. I know I'm making it look simpler than it is. Also, when you're pulling this off, when you're pulling the front off, there's magnets in here. This is the rotor that goes over the stator. So if you ever have to replace the stator, or if you're doing this and you think your stator's going or it's bad, now's the time to do it. But when you pull this off, it's magnetized. So be careful when you're pulling this off. You might want to get somebody to help you. Also, when you put it back on, it could actually snap over your fingers. So be very careful. Clutch basket should come right out. But these are torqued to an enormous amount. So this front one's about 190 to 210. This one's about 80, so 80 is not too bad. But this one back here is lefty-tighty, righty-loosey, so it's reverse thread. So be very careful, especially if you come at it with an impact. Make sure when you hit the impact button that you're going forward and not backwards, because if you over-tighten that, I'm not sure what would happen. But we're going to get that pulled off, and we're going to see if we can't get to that shifter pawl and make some serious adjustments and get this stuff back together. All right, let's see if this impact will do the job. And again, this is 1 1/8. Sure, I got my right buttons. I haven't used this thing that much. Wow. That came off a little too easy in my opinion. This might be one of these situations where I'm glad we're getting in here. Interesting. Try to get this snap ring out. Comment in the section below if you hate snap rings, because I do. Well, help me out here. Woo, came right out. And here we do have a 1 in, you can actually see that, look at that, 1 3/16. I am betting that this is going to come right off with just a tap. And remember, go forward on this one, not backwards. Reverse threads. Alt tuck. Well, there we go. And there is a washer in here that literally says front on it. I think that goes without saying. Or out, excuse me. I don't know if you can see it, but it says out and it's beveled. Just make sure you know what I mean. I don't have to say it. I'll say it. The out is out. We're going to try to pull all this off. I may have to phone a friend on this one and get some help because I have something wrong with one of my arms that I know nobody gives a crap about, but I want to make sure I can get my full grip on this sucker. So let's see if we can get this popped off on its own. If not, with the magic of video editing, we may be done very quickly. Ooh, see how that clutch is wanting to come off? Okay, I'm going to go get some help because I can't use this right arm that much. We will be right back. Just like magic, we got the primary drive off with the help of somebody. So proof that you can do this with 1.5 arms on the floor. Just get you a little help. My main reason for doing that is I did not want to drop that clutch basket. So we are now good. So here's where we wanted to get to. So this is just on here just to kind of help move this if needed. It's just sitting on there. But here is the actual shifter pawl, or whatever you want to call it. I think that's how you pronounce it. It goes down around here. Okay? And then you can see this moves it when you're shifting. Well, what you want to do, first of all, you have to get the bike in third gear. Probably should have said that at the start. It's probably easier to do that before you remove all this monstrosity, but you can still do it as it sits. Get it in third gear, and you'll have this hole, this opening right up here. When you look, I don't think you're going to be able to see it. I'm not getting the light I need. But there is a gap between this pin right in here, right above my finger, and where this shifter pawl makes connection with it. What you want to do is you want to loosen this 7/16 inch nut and this one as well. Once you loosen those, this whole assembly will kind of free float a little bit. You take a 5/32 inch drill bit, again 5/32, and you want to put that in between this pin that you can see right in there and the top of this shifter pawl. Now that's everything I read. I'm going to give it a whirl and see if it works. I can tell by looking at this one right now in third gear, it's out of adjustment. So hopefully this is our problem. Another recommendation is to replace these nuts. I went ahead and got some because these suckers have probably been on here since 97, so in 50-some thousand miles. And then these are torqued to 90 to 110 inch-pounds, not foot, inch-pounds. So you essentially use the drill bit to kind of hold it in place, and then you retighten or tighten these down to 90 to 110 inch-pounds. And hopefully we get this sucker back together and she shifts a little bit better. Oh, and by the way, that stator does look rather newish. I don't ever remember seeing a factory stator looking like that. I could be wrong, but that would explain why it looks like somebody's been in here rather recently. So, for those of you that care. But let's get on to the actual shimming part of this and see if we can't make it work. So this is where having a camera operator would come in mighty handy based on where we're at right now. So we've got our 5/32 inch drill bit in there. They are very sensitive. They can pop out pretty easy, so I'm not going to touch it. We already kind of hand snug these 7/16 inch bolts down. We do need an extension on this. I'm not even paying attention. So now I will attempt to get these torqued while holding this in place to keep it from wanting to fall out. It should be fine since I already hand tightened it. One thing to pay attention to is if you look at when I'm done, I'll kind of show a good close-up of where the alignment is. I was not all the way in third gear. This bike was so bad that I wasn't even in third gear completely, and it wouldn't even allow me to get that drill bit in there. So pay attention to that. If your bike shifts pretty good, you'll know when you're in third gear. It's pretty clear, but this thing was bad. So let me see what we can do here. This little device here will only get us to about 60 inch-pounds, but this allows me to get two hands on this, and I'll finish the rest with the ratchet, with the torque wrench ratchet. Oh, that's not, well, let's see. Okay, there's a little bit. Pretty large torque wrench for this, but it does get to where we need to get to. There we go. I'm going to try to test this with everything before I put all the covers back on and all that. I'm going to put the shifter on, see if it goes. I don't know if I got this right. That seems a little suspect for me, but let's see what we get here. Again, I am brand new at this. It does seem to move a little smoother though, so that's promising. So in theory, we're in third gear, so I should be able to go down to second. Oh, that's good. That slid off the... So I didn't like the way that went together before, and I kind of slowed down. This is kind of reality, folks. Not everything goes as perfect as a perfect shop video. Everybody knows this. So you can see where these are loose. You can see where this whole setup is basically moving, and I didn't show this before, so that's my bad. And up in there, there is a pin, as I pointed out, and this shifter pawl literally sits down on that. So the drill bit, what I was doing before is I was actually lifting up on here a little bit and moving this spring. So I don't need to be doing that. So everything I read and look at shows me just to put it up under there. So we're going to give it a whirl. And if this don't work, then I'm not tearing into this thing again. But I do believe it was definitely out of adjustment once I was looking at it earlier. So we're going to get that drill bit in there, let it just kind of sit, because everything I showed shows it just sitting in there. And literally what will happen is you lift it up. Well, it's up right now. Put that in there. It essentially stays right there. With that, you want to get that proper spacing. You tighten and you tighten, and that's it. And in theory, we should be good to go. So let's get that thing torqued down and we can start getting this sucker back together. All right, let's try this one more once. See if we can get this. You can see this is moving up, down, and move the camera, so hopefully everybody can see. I just want to get this right because it would be a shame to do all this for nothing, but it happens. Okay, so there's our spacing. We're in third gear. You can see the orientation of everything. I'm going to try to hold that with my 10 fingers on one hand. And these are very light. Is that one? Well, this torque wrench don't make any noise at all on these low specs. I got to remember that. What happens when you buy stuff from Hobo Freight, I suppose. Okay, that should be it in theory. Yeah, so we got these both torqued. We had, I got to make sure I don't hit that. That's crazy. We have what should be our proper spacing in there. See if I can get some more light on it. It's hard to see, but when you're looking at it, you'll see. You'll know what I'm talking about. And I think that is going to do it, folks. I think that's the adjustment. I think I'm probably overthinking it. That's a lot of thinking. Shouldn't say it that much, but whatever. So we're going to get all this back together. The cool thing is there's no gasket sticking anywhere, so I do not have to sit there and scrape that off all day. Thank you so much for that, whoever pulled this cover off already. So, all right, that is a wrap. We're going to get it back together, and fingers crossed, we did the right thing. Okay, you can see we got the primary back on, the primary drive back on, the front rotor and the rear clutch basket, whatever you want to call it. I actually got that on there by myself. So we're going to torque this to 200 foot-pounds, which is quite a bit. These are heavy duty, 200 foot-pounds. I think it's 190 to 210. And then red Loctite on this nut. I've already got the Loctite on it. You want to take a piece of steel or something, some kind of a jam bar, a piece of wood, whatever you can. They make tools for it, but you don't need it. Jam that in there, and then we're just going to give her the you-know-what here. There we go. Whew. She was on there, or she's on there now. And then this rear one is 70 to 80 foot-pounds with red Loctite as well. Remember, it's reverse threads. Okay, so remember the washer. Washer goes on first, where it says out. Goes without saying. That goes out. Well, come on now. Get in there. Don't give me a fit. I'll give you a fit right back. Okay, which means I'll do nothing and just get mad about it. Now, I'm going the wrong way. Well, that would not have lasted very long. Oh, that's fine. Whatever. Now, it would help if I understood how things worked. There we go. Now you can fall. Okay. All torqued. Okay, all that's left now, we need to get the cover back on. Of course, gasket on first. Once we get the cover on, we will get the fluid in it and all that good stuff. I am not going to bore you guys with reinstalling all this. It's pretty self-explanatory. One thing you do want to do is, if I get down here a little bit, is when you torque these, number one, I can't remember the exact spec. I think it's maybe 100 inch-pounds. I can't remember. I will look at the book on that one. But you want to do them kind of and starting in the middle and do like a star pattern. So like here to here to here to here to here to here and so on. You kind of work your way out and just kind of torque it as you go. You don't want to go in there and just work on one end altogether, because you're either going to warp this cover or you're going to booger up threads, or you're just going to have a leak. So take your time with that. And also, when you're putting this on, this shifter shaft right here has to go through this opening. And at the same time, remember, you have to lift this up to get the tensioner shoe underneath it. So it's kind of like both at the same time. So as you're installing it, you get your hand underneath there and then push that cover on. It's not that difficult. Just take your time with it and it won't be that big of a deal. But when we get this thing wrapped up, we're going to fire this bike up and see if it works. I have my doubts if it even fixed it, but hopefully it's helped it a little bit to where it'll go through the gears good enough to get this thing around town. Okay, I lied. We do have two more quick updates. So we got the cover on. I wanted just to kind of mention real quick about adjusting the primary chain and the clutch. Wasn't going to do this on film. I'm just going to kind of explain it really quick. For the primary chain itself, there is an adjuster underneath here. And then all you're going to do is you're going to adjust it to where you get about 3/8 to 1/2 an inch worth of free play right here. That's all you're doing. And that's done at cold, 3/8 to 1/2 inch. Super easy to do. Put your cover back on, torque it to spec, you're done with that. And then for the clutch cable adjustment, you always got to make sure you loosen it first at the clutch lever, which we've already done that. For here, all you're going to do, you're going to take this right here. If I can get the screwdriver in there, you want to make sure you turn it clockwise just to make sure it's nice and loose. Then you're going to start to just kind of tighten it up, going counterclockwise. Once you feel the slightest bit of resistance, stop. Go back about 1/4 of a turn, or go back 1/4 of a turn. You're good to go. Make your adjustments up at the handlebar and you're done. All right, so good news and not so good news. The good news is she goes into first and neutral with ease. So that's good. You can get on the bike and actually pop it right into first. The problem is 4th and 5th gears are still, they're sloppy. You really gotta force on them to get them to go into gear. So I'm not sure at this point. You know, again, this bike with this many miles on it, you can even see it there. It's got quite a bit. I think this bike has just been beaten on so much its life that it's just not one to cooperate. But we did make an improvement, so that is good. I'll take that. It's better than where it was. And all we were out was a gasket and some primary fluid. Well, thank you guys so much for watching this. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it was helpful for someone. Unfortunately, still some problems on this bike, and I wanted to still show this content, show this video, just to prove a point that every time you dig into something, you don't always know if it's going to work, especially something that's as old and it's got as many miles as this. I don't know the history of this bike. It could have been ran with low primary transmission fluid for the longest time. I don't know. I'm trying to smooth it out, but I don't think it's worth putting the parts in it. I suspect that it might actually need some more shifter components inside the primary, but this bike as it sits is not probably worth much more than $3,000. So to me, it's just not worth getting into it. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed it. Again, please like and subscribe if you can, and we will chat with you guys next time.